The envelope had been in the file since December 1989. It was a standard business envelope, white, letter-sized, sealed with the gummed flap pressed down, and a strip of clear tape over it, the kind of redundant sealing that suggests whoever closed it wanted to be certain it stayed that way. On the front, in handwriting that had faded to the color of old rust, were 4 words, "For investigating officer only." Below that, a second line, "Do not discard." It had been filed inside the Joellen Marsh homicide case folder at the Ashtabula County Coroner's Office in Jefferson, Ohio, sometime in December 1989. It had moved with that file through 2 facility transfers and 1 office renovation. It had been reviewed in inventory audits in 1997, in 2004, and in 2011. On each occasion, it had been logged as sealed document, origin unknown, contents undetermined, and returned to the folder. No one had opened it. On a Wednesday morning in February 2025, a cold case investigator named Detective Mara Stills sat down at a table in the Ashtabula County Evidence Archive with the Marsh case folder in front of her. She worked through it for 2 hours. When she got to the envelope, she held it for a moment. She read the 4 words on the front. She read them again. Then she picked up the letter opener on the table beside her and ran it along the top of the flap. What she found inside had been sitting in that file for 36 years and 2 months. A name. But before we get to what was written on that page, and to what happened to the man whose name was on it, we have to go back to Ashtabula County, Ohio, in the late autumn of 1989. Because to understand why a name spent 36 years sealed in an envelope instead of in a courtroom, you first have to understand who Joellen Marsh was, and who in that county had enough power in 1989 to make sure an envelope stayed closed. Ashtabula County sits at the far northeastern corner of Ohio, pressed up against the Pennsylvania state line and Lake Erie's southern shore. In 1989, it was a county of small towns, orchard land, and covered bridges. The kind of place where the winters came early and stayed late, where the lake-effect snow could bury a car overnight, and where the population of the county seat, Jefferson, hovered just above 3,000. People knew their neighbors. They knew their neighbors' business. They knew, in many cases, who held what over whom, because in a county that size, the social architecture was visible in a way it never could be in a city. Joellen Marsh was 22 years old in November 1989. She had grown up in the township of Geneva on the lake, on the narrow strip of resort community that lined the lakeshore, where in summer the population swelled with vacationers, and in winter shrank back to the people who had nowhere else to be. Her parents, Frank and Adele Marsh, had run a bait and tackle shop on the strip for 21 years. Joellen had worked the register since she was 12. She knew every regular customer by name and what they were fishing for, and whether the crappie had been running. After high school, she had stayed in the county, which she had planned since childhood, and had taken a job as a checker at the Pick and Save grocery in Jefferson. She was 22 and had been there 3 years and was the kind of employee her manager described to investigators, without prompting, as someone you never had to worry about. She was never late. The register was never short. She remembered what people bought and asked about it the following week, which made people feel seen in the particular way that small courtesies make people feel seen when they are otherwise invisible. She had a 1984 Chevette, the color of old mustard, that she drove the 14 miles from Geneva on the lake to Jefferson every morning and back again every evening. She had a VHS copy of Dirty Dancing that she had rented so many times from the Jefferson video store that the clerk had eventually just sold it to her. She called her mother every Sunday morning without fail, from the payphone at the gas station 2 blocks from her apartment, because she didn't yet have a phone of her own. She had been saving for one. On the evening of Thursday, November 16, 1989, Joellen worked her shift at the Pick and Save, clocked out at 6:45 p.m., and walked to the parking lot to her Chevette. Her co-worker, a woman named Paulette Sims, watched her pull out of the lot from the store's front window at approximately 6:52 p.m. It was already fully dark and already below freezing, and the parking lot lights made the ice on the blacktop look like hammered silver. Paulette was the last person to see Joellen Marsh alive. The Chevette was found the following morning on the shoulder of State Route 307, 4 miles east of Jefferson. Motor cold, driver's door ajar, Joellen's purse on the passenger seat, and her keys still in the ignition. The temperature had dropped to 11 degrees overnight, and there was an inch of new snow on the hood. Adele Marsh, who had called her daughter's apartment 6 times since 8 o'clock the previous evening, and had driven to Jefferson at midnight when the calls went unanswered, had already filed a missing persons report with the Ashtabula County Sheriff's Office before the car was found. Joellen was discovered 3 days later in a woodlot off a township road in Morgan Township. 8 miles from the Chevette, she was 22 years old. The Ashtabula County Sheriff's Office assigned the case to Detective Sergeant Carl Novak, 31 years old, 4 years in investigations, thorough and methodical in a way that his supervisor would later describe as almost compulsive. Novak understood from the first examination of the Chevette that Joellen had not stopped on Route 307 voluntarily. The car showed no mechanical failure. The keys were in the ignition. The heat had been on when the car was abandoned. The controls were set for full heat, and the fan was on high, which was what you did when you were a 22-year-old woman driving 14 miles in 11-degree weather. You didn't turn the car off in the middle of Route 307 in those conditions by choice. Someone had made her stop. Physical evidence recovered from the scene, trace fibers, a partial boot impression in frozen ground near the woodlot, was submitted to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation Lab in November 1989. Novak developed his persons of interest list quickly and pursued it with patience through December. A former boyfriend who had made trouble after a breakup 6 months earlier was interviewed twice and eliminated through an alibi confirmed by 3 independent witnesses. A man who had made an unsolicited and unwelcome approach to Joellen at the grocery store in September was located, interviewed, and cleared through physical evidence exclusion. By Christmas 1989, Novak had one name he could not move off and could not charge. That name appeared in his case notes, but not yet in any document accessible to anyone outside the investigation. He had a strong investigative conviction. He had no evidence that a prosecutor could take into a courtroom. And then, in the first week of December 1989, something arrived at the Ashtabula County Coroner's Office that changed what was possible, or should have changed it. The coroner at the time, a man named Dr. Everett Langham, who had held the elected position for 14 years, and who was due to retire in the spring of 1991, received a handwritten letter. The letter was unsigned. It described, in careful and specific terms, what the writer had seen on the evening of November 16, 1989, on State Route 307. A specific vehicle, a specific location, a specific time, and a name. The name of a person the writer had recognized. The name of a person the writer was afraid to name to law enforcement directly, because of who that person's father was. That person's father was Clarence Dobb. He had served as Ashtabula County Commissioner for 11 years. He was the most powerful elected official in the county. He had appointed Everett Langham to 2 interim positions before Langham's first election to the coroner's office, and he had publicly supported Langham's subsequent 2 re-election campaigns. Langham read the letter. He placed it in a standard business envelope. He sealed it. He wrote 4 words on the front. He filed it in the Marsh case folder. He did not give it to Karl Novak. He did not give it to the sheriff. He did not give it to anyone. He retired in April 1991. He died in 2003. He took to his grave whatever he told himself about why he had done what he did. Frank and Adele Marsh drove to the Ashtabula County Sheriff's Office every month through 1990. They drove there every quarter through 1991. Karl Novak answered every visit. He told them everything he could tell them, which was not enough. He felt the inadequacy of it every time. By 1994, 5 years had passed since November 1989. Adele Marsh had not been back to the payphone at the gas station 2 blocks from Joellen's old apartment. She could not go near it. Frank had sold the bait and tackle shop in 1992. The energy had gone out of it, he told the buyer, and that was as close to the truth as he could get. They still lived in Geneva, on the lake. They had nowhere else to go and no reason to leave the place where Joellen had grown up. The man whose name was in the sealed envelope was Dennis Daub, the son of Commissioner Clarence Daub. He was 31 years old in 1989. By 1994, he was 36, working in property management in Ashtabula, married, with 2 daughters, living in a house on Lake Road that had a view of the water on clear mornings. He attended county events. His father had retired from the commissioner's office in 1993, and Dennis had settled into the ordinary rhythms of a man in a county where nothing was pursuing him. By 2000, 11 years had passed. Karl Novak was still with the Ashtabula County Sheriff's Office, now a lieutenant, still carrying the Marsh case with him in the way that investigators carry the ones they never closed. He had requested a review of the physical evidence in 1998 and again in 2001, hoping that advances in DNA analysis might offer something the 1989 lab work had not. The trace fiber evidence from the scene produced no usable biological profile. The boot impression, documented only in photographs, was insufficient for comparison. The dead ends held. In 2004, an inventory audit of the Ashtabula County Coroner's Evidence Archive logged the sealed envelope for the second time and returned it to the file. Unopened, the auditor noted it as sealed document, origin unknown, contents undetermined. She spent 7 seconds on it. She moved to the next item. Novak retired in 2008. He told his daughter that the Marsh case had been his career's most permanent unfinished sentence. He said he had always believed the answer was in the county. He did not know it was also in the building. By 2015, 26 years had passed. Adele Marsh had died in 2011. Frank Marsh was in his 70s, still in Geneva on the lake, still putting flowers at the small roadside marker his neighbors had helped him place near the woodlot in Morgan Township in 1991. He drove there every November 16th. He had done it 31 times in a row. He had never missed. Dennis Daub was 57 years old in 2015. His father had died in 2009. He had grandchildren by 2015. He had a boat he kept at the Geneva Marina. He drove past the Pick-End Save in Jefferson once a week. The sealed envelope in the case file had been logged in an inventory audit in 2011. The auditor spent 11 seconds on it. Every case on this channel depends on someone eventually asking the question nobody thought to ask, or asking the one everyone was afraid to. If you want to hear those answers, please take a second to like this video and subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get to February 2025, and to what Mara Stills found when she finally ran that letter opener along the top of that envelope. Detective Mara Stills had been assigned to the Marsh cold case in October 2024 as part of an Ashtabula County Sheriff's Office review of unresolved homicides predating 2000. She was 39 years old and had worked investigations for 13 years. She read Carl Novak's original case notes in a single sitting on her first day with the file, and felt immediately the shape of what he had known and what he had been unable to reach. She requested the full physical evidence archive from the coroner's office in November 2024. The archive manifest listed, among other items, envelope, sealed, white, letter size. Origin unknown. Contents undetermined. Filed December 1989. She noted it. She requested the physical file. On the morning of February 5, 2025, she sat down at the evidence archive table with the Marsh case folder, the physical evidence box, and the sealed white envelope. She read the 4 words on the front. She read them twice. Then she picked up the letter opener. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of lined notebook paper, folded in thirds. The handwriting was careful and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who had composed this slowly. The letter described the evening of November 16, 1989. It described a silver-gray pickup truck, a specific location on State Route 307 between Jefferson and the Township line. A specific time, approximately 6:58 p.m. It described what the writer had witnessed from the access road on the far side of the tree line, a brief, violent scene they had recognized too late to intervene in and had been too frightened, afterward, to report directly. It described the truck's driver, whom the writer had seen clearly in the light from the Chevette's still-running headlamps. Dennis Dobb. It said his name. It said his father was Clarence Dobb, and that the writer was afraid of what reporting it would mean. It said, "I am telling you this so someone will know, even if I am not brave enough to say it out loud. Please make it count." Stills read the letter 3 times. Then she set it on the table and sat very still for a moment. Then she called her supervisor. That afternoon, she drove to Geneva on the lake and sat down with Frank Marsh at his kitchen table. She was careful with what she told him. She told him the investigation had developed a significant new lead. She told him she believed they were close. Frank Marsh was 78 years old and had driven to that roadside marker in Morgan Township 35 times in a row. He looked at her across the table and said, "Is it someone I know?" She told him she couldn't answer that yet. He nodded. He said, "All right. Tell me when you can." She drove back to Jefferson and began building the evidentiary bridge between the letter, which was an unsigned account, and the physical evidence that could support it in a courtroom. She submitted the original trace fiber evidence from 1989 for modern forensic reanalysis. The BC lab returned a viable partial DNA profile from a fiber recovered from Joellen's coat. A profile that could not have been usefully analyzed with 1989 technology, but that, with current methods, was sufficient for genealogical processing. The genealogical analysis identified a family cluster in Ashtabula County. It converged on a single male individual, Dennis Dobb, 61 years old. Lake Road, Geneva, a direct comparison warrant was issued in April 2025. The DNA from the comparison confirmed the match. The letter had been correct for 36 years. On May 8, 2025, Dennis Dobb was arrested at his home on Lake Road at 7:30 in the morning. He came to the door in a flannel shirt and said nothing. He was handcuffed on his front porch, with a view of the lake behind him, gray and flat in the morning light. He was charged with first-degree murder. In Ashtabula County, the reaction moved in 2 directions simultaneously. The first was the shock of the arrest. A man in his 60s, a grandfather, a fixture at the county marina. The second was a deeper, slower reckoning with the envelope itself, which local news had reported on by early afternoon. What the envelope revealed was not just that Dennis Dobb had killed Joellen Marsh. It revealed that Everett Langham had received a letter naming him in December 1989 and had placed it in an envelope and sealed it and never told another living soul. A man who had held public office, whose job was specifically to serve the public interest in matters of death, had protected a commissioner's son and buried the answer to a family's 36-year question in a filing cabinet. Langham had been dead for 22 years. He could not be questioned. He could not be charged. But the county knew what he had done and what it had cost. Frank Marsh was told of the arrest by phone on the morning of May 8th. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Does he know that we know?" He was told yes. He was quiet again. Then he said, "Good." Dennis Dobb entered a guilty plea to second-degree murder in September 2025, which the state attorney's office accepted in light of his age and the complexity of proceeding to trial with evidence spanning 36 years. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. At sentencing, Frank Marsh read a statement. He described Joellen's Sunday morning calls from the payphone. He described the Dirty Dancing Veach tape that he had found in her apartment and kept because he could not throw it away. He described 36 years of November 16ths and what it had cost his family to drive to a woodlot in Morgan Township, every single one of them. He said, "She deserved to have someone open that envelope in 1989. I am grateful someone finally did." Joellen Marsh would have been 58 years old this year. She had a yellow Chevette and a VH tape she had worn to near transparency, and Sunday morning calls from a payphone 2 blocks from her apartment. She had been saving for a phone of her own. She had 3 years of a grocery register that was never once short. Dr. Everett Langham sealed her name inside an envelope in December 1989 and retired in 1991 and died in 2003, and never, in any of those years, undid what he had done. He had the answer in his hands. He read it. He folded it back into thirds. He sealed it inside a white envelope and wrote 4 words on the front and filed it away and trusted, perhaps, that someone else would find it eventually. Or perhaps he trusted that they wouldn't. We cannot know which. He took that knowledge with him. What we can know is this: the anonymous writer who had composed that letter on lined notebook paper, who had folded it carefully and mailed it to the coroner's office, had ended it with a specific request. Please make it count. They had trusted Langham to make it count. He had not. But they had written it anyway, had found the minimum courage available to them, which was the courage of a sealed letter to an official they hoped would do what they themselves could not. That letter sat in a file for 36 years. Mara Stills opened it in February 2025. Frank Marsh read his statement in September 2025. The anonymous writer, whoever they were, wherever they are if they are still alive, had their letter made to count. 36 years late. By someone they never met. What does it mean to you that the case was solved not by DNA, not by a new technology, not by a deathbed confession, but by a letter that an elected official chose to suppress, and that survived him by 22 years? And what accountability, if any, exists for an institution when the person who failed it is already dead? Leave those thoughts in the comments. This case is going to stay with people, and I want to know where you land. Justice found Joellen Marsh after 36 years. Her story is a reminder that the truth, once committed to paper, outlasts almost everything, including the people who tried to bury it. If you believe that, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More solved cold cases are in the description. Thank you for being here.